Hello, 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 hello. Let me adjust some volumes here. All right. Gimli, good to see you. Man, it's been a lot of moving pieces going on here trying to get this stream running. I had to reboot my computer, and you know how that goes. I was afraid it wasn't going to come back up in time. But yeah, so here we are. Monday night stream. A little bit of hopefully a little bit of education. We're gonna get some learning about some indirect fire stuff that I learned over the last Slow Grow League games. So yeah, we're going to cover that. We're going to talk about that, give some visual examples of how that sort of stuff works. And then we'll do a little painting, hang out with you guys, hopefully hear what you've been up to, see what Captain America Claus may have brought you. Yeah, rockets go zoom zoom. They sure do. Krugerrand, glad to see you. How's things? Pretty good. I had an extra day off this weekend because of the holiday, and my wife and I made the most of it. We played a bunch of disc golf and saw some movies and just all kinds of solid things. I really enjoyed it. It was nice to have the extra day off. Last Friday I got a chance to go to the Slow Grow League. I haven't actually played in the Slow Grow League, which is kind of a strange thing to say because my armies have played in it. But so we've got a kind of a newish player, somebody who was just getting into it back before COVID, and he's been showing up, and so he's been driving my models because he wasn't around, he wasn't like in the loop when we were putting together the Slow Grow League, so he doesn't have anything ready. But he showed up the first couple of weeks to drive my models and seems to be having a good time, so that's all good. Speaking of my models, yeah, let's just throw things in the floor. That's always the best way to start things out. Here's my attack squad. So I'm sure you probably have all getting tired of seeing me splash these guys. Good Lord. The manual dexterity goes early, trust me. I just wanted to show off my progress. If I can get all of these guys, I always forget this camera is kind of in a weird spot. But anyway, that's my dudes. Get on screen. Come on, snuggle up. Short people in front. Anyway, this is my progress so far. Good grief. It's going to be hard to get all these guys in here when I'm done. So I've got an attack squad, which is these guys over here. And the one thing that I really did to these guys since the last time you probably have seen them, let me wait for my stream to catch up here, is I had these tiny little decals. Because, I got 4 fire drakes that are basically identical. And so I just went in and dropped these little decals on their shoulders so that I can identify them properly when I'm taking damage and, telling my opponent who's what to how to who to why. But so that worked out. And then I did something similar here on my, I ran out of the white decals, so I had to go to black here on the fire support guys. It's a little less stand out. I wish I'd had more of the white decals, but these aren't terrible. I need to just get a giant set of sort of sci-fi numeric decals and put those in. No, Gimli, so yeah, tell me, totally. So it's not slacking, right? It's a slow grow league, so I've only got 2 weeks to paint this stuff up, basically. And so I feel like I'm doing a fantastic job. I painted 4 models basically from scratch in the period of right around 2 weeks. So I feel good about that. But you're right, I would normally do... Yes, Colonel Kane. Yes. Normally, I like to do freehand stuff when I do that kind of thing, but in this case, sometimes we have to cut corners to make ends meet. Have you ever been at the store and you really wanted to buy the steak, but you had to settle for the hamburger? I know I've been there, so I'm just saying sometimes we got to buy a hamburger instead of steak. Yeah, I saw that. So I've always looked at those Piranha decals as, like unit decals, like a iconography for specific units. I guess I never really thought to look and see if they had just blocks of numbers, because that's what I've always bought them for in the past, was for the symbols. But now that you mention it, I'm going to have to go back in and look and see if there are any of those available. I had some, these are from a Gundam kit. I don't do Gundams, but one of the local stores does huge Gundam things, and they occasionally get transfers in, and I just pick some up so I could support them, because as dumb as it sounds, every time I walk into the stores, I like to buy something. And so I bought the decals, and they were actually really nice. Although I'm not very good with decals. I destroyed a bunch of them trying to put them together. Oh, Lord. Yeah, thanks, Ilmarin. I really appreciate it. Okay. Man, computer problems. I really didn't think I was going to make it back up in time. Half an hour ago, I started rebooting my computer because it was acting weird. And I fired up the little intro video like with 2 minutes to spare. so yeah, I was afraid we weren't going to make it. All right, so this is, and I'm still not quite sure what to call these guys. So this is a Templar free company that I'm making up. All right, and so free companies are really the Templars' way of just getting their military experience, like combat experience in other people's wars without actually getting the Templars involved. And so generally what will happen is a free company will go out and sign up as mercs. Yeah, Krugerrand, it's a terrible machine. I had a much better machine up here, and then I was like, all I do is stream with that thing, and my computer downstairs that I occasionally play a game on, I switched them. And so now this one runs the stream just fine, but heaven forbid if you have to restart it, apparently. Anyway, long story. I should just break down and buy a new one. But I haven't done that yet. Again, hamburger, steak, pork chops, things like that. All right, so a Templar free company is the Templars basically sending their military out to work as mercs so they gain combat experience. It's, at least, now this is my take on it. This is from what I've read. It's basically them saying, go be mercenaries so you can become really good soldiers and then come back and teach your fellows and just serve in our group. Yeah, Ilmarin, so the downstairs computer, its main hard drive is a memory stick. Whatever that's called nowadays. It's not even a solid state drive. It's a memory stick. Maybe that's what you're talking about. That thing boots like a beast. This one, not so much. This one I cobbled together from spare parts. Yeah. So yeah, like I said, sometimes I got to buy hamburger. I can't buy steak every time. Yeah, that's sort of the Krugerrand. I think you have it exactly. Yeah. Well, Cav Boss, listen. Why don't you take over the show and tell us all about the Templar free companies? I would much rather listen to that than listen to me go on about this stuff. But yeah, so this is my Templar free company. I'm not entirely sure what to call them. I always think of Templars as French. And I know that the Templars are a much broader based civilization than just, descended from French peoples. But that's what I like. That's the side of them that I like to play and develop, right? So one of my favorite, one of the people in my gosh, I can never keep these guys. I've got a couple of different Templar units. I'll post up something about them on the forums. I've got some details for them that I've made up. But one of my favorite names from Napoleonic history is the last name. There was a marshal named Desaix, Desaix, and I know that name just always caught my attention when I was a little kid, and so I just propagate that sort of thing. So long story short, this is the beginnings of my Templar free company. I want to call them, and I don't speak French at all, so I always have to ask people how to do this, but I kind of want to call them the Green Irregulars or the Irregular Greens or something like that. But I'm, to Frenchify it. So I've kind of tinkered with that. I stuck it in Google Translator, and I've got a daughter that took a bunch of French in college, but I haven't seen her in a day or two, so I haven't had a chance to ask her. Anyway, so somewhere down there's a name for these guys. They have some nice decals. I'm definitely going to hit up the Piranha Games restock and look and see if I can get some more white numbers. I may go in and if I can find some good ones, I'll maybe on this side I'll put the white version just so I've got a little variety. I don't know. Anyway, I think they came out pretty solid. I don't have a problem with them. They look nice to me. Pretty good for very fast painting for me. So I mean, literally, I painted these 4 guys, bases and all, in 2 weeks. That is a blistering pace for me. Blistering. I mean, that's like speeding through the school zone backwards at 95 miles an hour for somebody like me. Yeah, something along those lines. Although I'm guessing irregular. There may be a French word for irregular. All right, so that being said, so my friend David piloted my forces in the Slowgrower League. And during the Slowgrower League, I was basically in constant communication. Wow, Gimli, I love it. I'm going to steal that. That's exactly the sort of thing I was looking for. Just send me a bill. I appreciate it. I was basically in constant contact with John to ask questions about certain parts of indirect fire. I'd read them. I'd gone over them ahead of time. I touched base with them before I ever went down to the game. But you know how gamers are. They're creative. They're like, well, what if I did this? And how does this work? And I'm like, I'm not sure. Let's find out. So I thought I would share some of those lessons here before we dove into the painting. And so I brought in a handy little building. Make sure I got it on screen here. Just something to use as a piece of terrain to show you how what I call, now this is not an official term at all, but I call the indirect fire shadow. All right. And so there's basically, see if I can stand this thing up in a way that will allow you to see what I'm talking about. So we got this building here, right? And let me back up a step, all right? Because there's something that you probably all know, but I want to cover it here because it sometimes surprises people that are coming. When I demo the game, people that are coming in from other war games, especially, sci-fi war games like a 40K or an Infinity or something like that, it surprises them a little bit the difference between blocking cover, line of sight blocking cover, and cover, which is what other games traditionally call cover. We probably need a separate set of words for that, but so here I'll just jump into it, okay? So we got this piece of terrain, and this thing is clearly, I'm going to call it elevation 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So in the context of the game, a cav, this indirect fire cav, this Sovereign 3 here, this fellow is elevation 3. That means he can see over any elevation level that's 2 or lower, and it has clear line of sight through any kind of terrain that is less than level 3. All right, so here's a piece of terrain from a Star Wars game that I tried playing, and I got rid of the models and I kept these because I thought these were pretty useful. I use these as sort of giant cav roadblock barriers when I'm playing in an urban setting. So to me, this is like an elevation 1 piece of terrain. So I plop this down on the table, and I stand a cav behind it within an inch, so you can gain credit for the cover. And now, not only does this cav have cover from any shot. Here, let's grab my needle from my airbrush. Any shot that comes in across the cover. I have tons of models for Stargrave Cougar and tons of models. I am so excited to play Stargrave, it's crazy. Yeah, obscure and obstruct. Okay, so like I said, John, feel free to take this stream over anytime you want. All right, so this line of sight is crossing this piece of cover. This piece of cover is obstructing the line of sight, I believe is the right word. You can still see this model. So this guy right here, this Fire Drake. Let's throw this guy down here so we're clear what we're talking about. Now we'll pretend like these guys are actually the Fire Drake, which is this guy right here. The guy that I'm shaking now in time delay. God, it's hard watching the Twitch stream. He's 20 or 30 inches away, okay? So he's not actually this close. We're just showing it this close so you can see it all. So this guy wants to shoot, the Fire Drake wants to shoot the Sovereign. Must be a battalion practice day or something, I don't know. So what happens is, because he can see, first of all, you measure line of sight from the center of the base to the center of the base, okay? So I look at the center of the Fire Drake, I look at the center of the Sovereign, And the question I'm asking about terrain or cover or obstructing or obscuring cover is, does the line of sight cross that piece of cover? And is the target model within 1 inch of the cover? So if this guy were back here, outside of 1 inch, this would provide no cover from the fire drake. But because the guy's within 1 inch of the cover, he's going to benefit from whatever cover this is. I think level 1 terrain would be -1, level 2 terrain would be -2, so on and so on. Yeah, exactly, Colonel Kane, exactly. So that's how cover works. Now, if somehow this line of sight didn't go across, right, from center to center, I mean, part of their bases are obscured by the cover here, okay? Part of them are obscured, but center to center, they are not. Therefore, there's no cover in this shot, okay? So that's the way regular cover works, okay? You have to be within 1 inch. Line of sight of the shot from the shooter to the target has to cross the cover, and at the point it crosses, you have to be within 1 inch, right? Sometimes you get into these weird situations where you're behind cover like this. I don't know if you can make this out. I hope you can. And this guy is within 1 inch of this piece of cover, but the line of sight comes through here. And I'm just going to say, I don't know if it actually is, but I'm just going to say for purposes of this illustration that this distance is more than 1 inch. Okay, in that case, this guy gets, this model, this cab gets no cover from this piece of terrain. Even though he's within 1 inch of it, the line of sight comes at the line that the line of sight comes across, he is more than 1 inch and therefore gets no cover. Okay, so that's the basics of regular cover. So now let's introduce a building. So this building is ginormous, right? Okay, it clearly blocks line of sight. I mean, these guys can't see each other. We don't play shooting through the windows or anything like that. This is a solid building. It blocks line of sight from one model to the other. Okay. Now, here's the thing that's important. All right. Remember, line of sight between two models is always, let's get this guy on the screen here. It's always center to center. Okay. And now this is an implication of that fact. And I'll summarize it here. The TLDR version. Cover that is equal to or taller than a cav's current elevation can never provide cover for that cav because you can't see. You either see or you can't see. It's a binary condition. So there's none of this corner hugging that you get in like cowboy and western movies, right? Where you lean out around the corner and you shoot and the corner gives you cover. And here's the reason why. The center of this base right here, the center of this guy's base and the center of this guy's base are either visible to each other and therefore there's no cover, or they're not visible to each other because the building's in the way and therefore there's no shot. Okay? So that's the important thing to understand about line of sight blocking cover, or as I think John is using the word obscuring cover. I think. John, correct me if that's not the right use of that word. Okay, this building obscures the shot from the fire drake to the sovereign. Okay, so there is no shot in this case because there's no line from the center of the fire drake to the center of the sovereign that doesn't go through this building, and they can't see over nor through this building. All right, so there's none of that like I said in the westerns when John Wayne would lean out and pop a shot down the alley at somebody. There's none of that. There's no cover for that. At least you could do it. You could move out here and shoot, but as soon as the center of your base allows you to see the enemy can see you, and therefore, because the cover is as taller than you, there is no cover. There's no benefit. Yes, Ilmarin, I think you got the gist of it there, right? If the cover blocks line of sight, there is no shot, and therefore there's no modifier to the shot, right? Okay, so that's how it works for direct fire. So now let's talk about some interesting things that came up. And I'm pretty sure I got these all right from John because he had explained them to me like 40 times that night. Thank God he was in a good mood. because I was texting him from the middle of the games going, John, what if this happens? What if there's a badger running across the field? What if a squirrel is singing the national anthem during the indirect fire? We covered everything, okay? We went through all the options I could possibly think of. All right, so here we go. So this, for indirect fire purposes, this building, let's make sure I got it on the screen here. This building creates what I call a shadow. Now that's an unofficial term. It's just my way of explaining it. So don't look for that in the rules. Don't expect John to know what you're talking about if you say something about indirect fire shadow. That's a made-up thing, okay? And I'm not even sure what the right word is, but this is the way it works, okay? Is if this model is within 1 inch of this line of sight blocking terrain, and another indirect fire model, God, I should have raised my camera up for this one. And I'm hesitant to try and move it because that darn thing will disconnect and then we won't have a stream. All right. So this model wants to shoot this model with indirect fire. Forget about the fact that they're too close. We're pretending like they're far away. Okay. Yeah, Kruger, feel free to throw out ideas. Maybe John will pick one of them up if he likes the sound of it. There's got to be a word out there that fits this thing I'm trying to explain to you. All right. So this building creates a shadow in which indirect fire can neither strike nor be fired out of. Okay, so if this model, this one right here, on hopefully the right-hand side of the screen, is within 1 inch of this building, then any indirect fire shot whose line of sight would cross this building. And remember, line of sight is center to center. Now, you're not actually targeting this model. Remember, strike points are always attached to the ground, right? So what you're basically saying is I nominated this spot underneath this model as my target, okay? And we'll get to other places you could have put this strike point in a minute, all right? So here's the strike point. Here, we'll grab something and mark it, okay? So we're nominating this spot right here. That's my strike point. And this guy happens to be standing right on top of it. Because the line of sight from the firing model to the target model crosses obscuring terrain, I think I'm using that word right, this model cannot take damage from that indirect fire. In fact, I don't even think you can fire. You'd have to touch base with John there. And there's only a tiny subtle difference between not being able to fire and not being able to take damage, I think. But it amounts to the same thing. In other words, this model cannot damage this model if the line of sight for the indirect fire crosses obscuring terrain, as long as this model is within 1 inch along the path of the line of sight. Okay, if there was some strange scenario where, like he's within 1 inch here, but the line of sight, he's not within 1 inch, you could probably fire at him. I think that's the way that works. Okay, now let's cover some alternative scenarios, right? So remember, some of these, I meant to grab a template and I forgot, but just picture one, right? So some of these AOEs are pretty big, right? The AOE, you can't shoot or take damage. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm glad you cleared that up because you said you can, and I'm like, what? What are you talking about? So strike points, to the best of my knowledge, don't have any elevation. They're just a place on the ground where you're deciding to launch the attack to. I've never heard John talk about a strike point having any kind of elevation. So I'm going to say that those two terms don't go together. Okay? And I think if you just followed the next example or two, you'll see that this is kind of a golden rule that this model cannot be damaged, just no matter how strange the scenario is. So anyway, pretend for a minute that I've got a template here, right? A pretty good sized template. And I'm pretty sure all the AOE numbers in Cav are radius numbers. So a 1 inch template is a 2 inch diameter. The Tiamat has an AOE 3, so it's a 6 inch pie plate flying across the table at you. But anyway, so you got this model here. This model is doing some firing. Let's say he wanted to be clever, right? He wanted to be clever, and so instead of firing into the shadow, he wants to put the strike point out here. Can you see that? Fortunately, I don't think you can see that. Let me slide this down. Slide this down a little further. Maybe you could. All right, so there's the strike point he decides to shoot there with the idea and it's not going to happen in this scenario, but the idea is that this big template that he's going to shoot is going to reach over here and nick this guy's base, right? And therefore, because he's under the template, he'll take damage. Well, that seems kind of logical, but it doesn't work that way. John said, hard and fast, that can, in this scenario, if a template lands here and would touch this guy, but again, the line of sight through obscuring terrain, center to center, this guy cannot take damage, okay? Doesn't matter that this template is placed out here purposefully or drifts out here, right? You could put it right behind him. He will not take damage from that indirect fire. Let's go even one step further. Let's say you've got another model out here. Again, I'm going to slide these over now so we can try and get this onto the screen, okay? So you got a second model involved in the equation, right? This guy is not, this fire drake is not in the shadow of any obscuring terrain. And so the enemy sovereign, in this case a training day exercise, he wants to fire at this guy, okay? He hits this guy and his template is big enough that it touches the fire drake who's in the obscuring shadow. Yes, Ilmarin, you're 100% right. If I said that backwards, I'm sorry. You are always firing at the ground with indirect fire, always. You just, I mean, if you want to shoot at a model, you shoot at the ground they're standing on. So it's there are some technical differences, especially when you come to target locks and things like that, which I'm not going to cover tonight. But you're right, 100%. You are always, the strike point is always on the ground, never on a model. So I probably misspoke there, and I'm sorry. So this sovereign's, this guy over here, his strike point is underneath this guy, and he hits him. Rolls a 12, whatever you want it to be. And the template from this AoE is big enough to touch the sovereign that's in the shadow of the building. Okay? No damage can occur to this sovereign. Okay? Even though this is a legitimate hit, if there was another fire drake, let's say right here, right? Let's put him right in front. Okay? If you hit this fire drake with a template whose area is big enough to touch this fire drake's base, this guy right here, you get to roll against both of these guys with whatever you hit them with. Okay? So normally this sort of thing would work, but because the sovereign is in the shadow of the obscuring terrain, he cannot take indirect fire damage from a shot that goes through, whose line of sight goes through the obscuring terrain. Doesn't matter if it deviates. Basically, it doesn't matter. There is no way. Sorry, Colonel Kane. Bring on your wet noodles. I'm hungry. There is no way for this guy to take indirect fire damage from any indirect fire which passes through obscuring terrain. Okay? Now, the converse of that is this is an indirect fire model. Sorry about that, it's the 4th. Let people have fun. So this guy right here, he's in the shadow. He's an indirect fire model. He has rockets. He cannot fire an indirect fire attack that crosses this line of sight as well. All right. So you can't hide in that shadow and then launch at anybody you want. Now, I think, again, John, if you're still here, correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah. So, I mean, from a role-playing perspective, obviously those rockets are exploding everywhere, but as luck would have it, the building eats all that damage, right? I kind of think of them as like anime missiles, right? You see those giant anime mechs and they shoot those missiles that kind of fly and cross over and go places. They're not like doing ballistic orbit or a ballistic trajectory shot. It's not like an artillery shell that goes up. These things are flying sort of in some sort of a route that lets them impact the cover that this person is behind, the obscuring cover. But to finish my point, so this fellow who's in the obscuring, who's behind this obscuring terrain in the shadow of this building, if you will, cannot make an indirect fire attack whose line of sight crosses the obscuring terrain. Now, I think he could, hypothetically, if he wanted to, he could shoot this guy. Because this guy, there's a clear line of sight between them, right? Obviously, that guy would be 30 or 40 inches away, probably, or something like that. This is tight for the camera, but center to center, he could see that guy. And so, correct me if I'm wrong, John, but he can still shoot people. He just can't launch an attack that crosses this piece of terrain right here. Okay? If the line of sight goes through this obscuring terrain, he's not allowed to fire. All right? So that's what I learned last Friday in my numerous text messages to John. Amongst other things, there were other rules questions that came up, but so in the context of the Slow Grow League, we added a fire support squad this week so that we could, or this past round rather, so that we could learn how indirect fire works. So the whole nature of this Slow Grow League for me is to teach the players who are experienced cab players, but it's been a long time since we played, and some of them hadn't quite fully grasped like all the aspects of the rules when we were playing. And so it's sort of a refresher course, if you will, about how all the different parts of the game work. So in our first round, we only did attack squads. And now in our second round, we only did support squads, indirect fire squads, I guess is what I should say. So, Ilmarin, if you are not within an inch of the building, there's no shadow. You can fire away. You can be there. You can receive fire, and you can give out fire, to the best of my knowledge. Obviously, Cab Boss, if I'm wrong, chime up and say something. But yeah, it's just within 1 inch, and of course, the line of sight has to go through that building. I'm not sure what your indirect comment means, Cab Boss. You want to elaborate a little bit? Now for the tricky part. It's not really tricky. It's just the gamey part, maybe. So you can direct fire through what, John? Help me out. What am I direct firing through? Ilmarin, that's exactly where I was going, right? So you can, to the best of my knowledge, you can combine reverse movement, backward movement, and forward movement in the same movement activation, to the best of my knowledge. So I believe you can, according to the current rules, and I'm going to anticipate that there may be some. These may not always be the current rules. You can hypothetically declare a move fire action, step back out of the 1 inch shadow, conduct your indirect fire, and then step back into the shadow. Because one of the tenets of Cav is that you can shoot anywhere along your movement action when you declare a move and shoot. Okay? So if at the beginning of my squad's activation, if I activate a model and I say my first action is going to be to move and my second action is going to be to shoot, I don't have to complete my move before I shoot. I'm allowed to declare the shot from anywhere along the route of my movement. So I can pause in the middle, take the shot, and assuming I survive, Overwatch people might be able to kill me or something, then I finish my move and go to where I was headed. Okay? It sort of lets you do that, we're in heavy terrain, you could dodge from one building to the next, and as you cross that long alleyway, you could shoot down the alleyway at a target. Run and gun works the same way. When you declare run and gun, you can shoot in at any point in time during the move that you want. Okay, let's read Cav Boss's note here. If there's a level 3 building between you and a target, neither of you can shoot each other in direct fire, no matter how far back. Yes, that is correct, John. Correct. So yeah, let's be 100% clear. Line of sight blocking terrain, obscuring terrain, always blocks indirect fire as long as the line of sight of the. I said indirect. My apologies. I'm going to start over. Obscuring terrain always blocks direct fire between two models as long as the line of sight for the attack goes through the obscuring terrain. You can never shoot line of sight. Okay? Now, indirect fire, as long as you're not in the shadow of that building, you can shoot and you can be shot. Ilmarin, I'm not qualified to answer that question. You're going to have to hit up. You're going to have to hit up John to get a detailed answer about that. I'm not read up on counter battery and the timing of how it happens and when it happens. So maybe that's something you guys can bring to John's show on Wednesday to get him to give you a detailed explanation for how counter battery fits into all this. I mean, it would make sense to me that you could shoot while the guy was out of the shadow, but I'm just a I'm just a rookie in here with the rest of you. Maybe I've been a rookie like a week longer than some of you, maybe a week less than some of you. Depends on who's here tonight. But yeah, so definitely hit John up for a detailed answer to that question. So that's the gist of it, right? That's obscuring terrain and traditional obstructing terrain. So I can explain Cthulhu. I can explain chain fire pods to you, I think, pretty simply. Okay? Let's do that. It's the rules show tonight. All right, so we've got 4 guys in a fire support squad. Let's say they each have, let's make sure I get this right in my head first, chain fire pod. Okay, so what you can do is you can declare that these 4 models are going to, let's say they're just going to target lock and fire indirect fire. That's their activation declaration. They declare they're all going to target the exact same strike point, and they're going to use their chain fire pods to try and leverage that SA. Okay, so what happens is you pick one of the models, and he declares a strike point. Let's put that strike point right here just so you can see it. Okay, so he declares this as a strike point. This guy declares this as a strike point. Okay. He fires, he makes his strike point roll, and if he hits it, then, if I remember correctly, none of these other guys have to make a strike point check anymore. They will automatically hit this strike point for that activation. Okay? Chain fire pod, right? Fire control system is the pluses, and chain fire pod is sharing the strike point. I believe that's the case. Now, let's say this guy misses. This guy... He's inaccurate. He scatters. His shot really goes over here because he rolled badly. Okay? So, and that's off screen. So anyway, it's over there. Trust me. See it? See it? See if I can bend the camera? It's over there. See? There's a strike point. It's right there. I promise you. It's really there. Anyway, put this back where it belongs. Hopefully. So he misses. His shot deviates. Maybe it misses everybody. Maybe it lands on some other random person. Whatever. You conduct the results of his indirect fire. Okay. Now this guy's up. All right. Now that scatter, he cannot shoot at it. Okay. Even if that deviated strike point landed on top of somebody. All right. So Cab Boss has answered your question, Ilmarin. There it is. It's nice having the game designer in the chat. Only he were just doing the one chatting. Come on, John, get on here. So this guy scatters, Cthulhu. Nobody else can use this scatter spot. All right, this is not a place where they can chain into. All right, even though this deviated spot may be 10 times better than your original declaration. You're hitting 7 models at once now for some crazy reason. He's the only one that gets to hit them. Okay. Now this guy's up. He has to then try and hit this spot right here, the original strike point. Okay, makes his roll. If he hits this spot, these 2 guys get to hit it for free. They don't have to make strike point rolls. Okay, if he deviates, he misses over here, same thing happens. He attacks anybody that's there. If there's nobody there, it's just a wasted shot, and nobody can chain into this spot. Okay, now this guy's up. We still got a chance. He fires at the original strike point. If he hits it, this guy gets to land for free. If not, it's the same. And then if that happens, then this guy just has to try and hit the strike point on his own because there's nobody else that can benefit from the chain fire pod because they're all just bad die rollers, apparently. They should practice rolling 12s. So that, to the best of my knowledge, is the way chain fire pods work. Now, fire control systems are actually much simpler, in my opinion, okay? These guys let's assume, I think they actually do maybe, they all have fire control system. So what that means is if they decide to engage the same spot, all 4 of them want to target this strike point again, what'll happen is, after the first guy, so the first one doesn't count towards this, but after the first person of the squad that has fire control system declares that, this guy gets a plus, well actually they all get a +1 to their strike point roll to hit this spot per person in the squad with fire control system up to a maximum of +2. So they can't get a +3 even though they all 4 of them have fire control system. Okay? So there's probably some clever strategy in there. I don't think they do, Elmarin. I do not believe they have to have a target lock to share the chain fire. I don't think it works that way. John will correct us, hopefully, if I'm wrong. But like I said, there's probably some clever numeric, like arithmetic for when to group up 3 guys, and maybe if there's another dude in here that has like the ability to, you split these 2 guys off. There's probably some math there that makes this more efficient. But in this scenario, if all 4 of these guys want to target this spot, what happens is they each have to roll their own strike points individually, unless maybe they also have chain fire pod, in which case things get really ugly and evil and bad for the person who's getting nuked from orbit by these IDF attacks. But I'm just talking about fire control system right now. All right, so there's a +2 because there's at least 2 people in here after the first. So this guy doesn't count. You technically have to have 3 to get the +2. The one person to start it, one cav to start it, and then a +1, a +2, and this guy doesn't add a plus, but he gets the benefit of the +2. Yeah, there's a lot of nasty stuff with those bishops, Cthulhu. I agree with you completely. And so then they're just each individually rolling their own strike point attacks, but with a +2. Now here's a question for Cab Boss, because I don't remember the answer to this question. Okay, can they each have individual strike points and use their fire control system? Now I know with chain fire pod, they have to share. They have to share the same strike point. But if they're trying to only leverage their fire control system, so Cab Boss, I'm not sure which one you're answering yes to. Do they all have to shoot at the same strike point? Yes or no? With fire control system. Sorry, I'm going to make you type yes twice. They do not. Okay, great. So what can happen is then so these guys can all declare 1, 2, 3, 4 separate strike points, but because they're sharing this fire control system information, they each get a +2 to hitting their strike point because of the fact that they're in the squad together. All right. Any other questions out there about indirect fire? Whew, Lord. This is kind of cool, but it's more than I thought I was going to get into. But I'm glad to see everybody curious about that, because I'll be honest with you. I mean, I knew that shadow existed, but I didn't understand how powerfully it affected the ability to both initiate and receive indirect fire attacks, IF attacks. When John answered my questions during the course of those 2 games that we played last Friday, I was learning stuff too. It was interesting. I didn't know you couldn't snipe people out by shooting, like shooting around the corner of the building, right? So I was under the impression that if I landed, let me get this airbrush needle out of the way before I do something bad to it, that if I landed a shot out here, and its template touched this guy's base and its strike point was not in that line of sight, which obviously it would be in this case, but if somehow you did the geometry or the trigonometry to make that work, then this guy would be subject to that attack, but he is not, which is interesting. There are some, I'm not going to go into these, but if you carefully read the cover rules, there are some shenanigans that are technically allowable with cover and indirect fire and this shadow thing that I think John, I've talked to John about, and I think he's working on a way to word things properly so that the shenanigans are no longer shenaniganable, or however you say that. Anyway, I guess we could talk about that. I mean, 15 minutes to go. I'm not going to start painting with the hairbrush now. I will show you real quick. I did make a little bit of progress. So let's at least talk a tiny little bit about painting, right? So I got these 3 sabers that I'm working on. I'm doing my usual work up here with the airbrush, and I got these guys. Let's talk about these guys, like I said, just real quickly, right? So here's my sabers and their turrets. I've got some highlighting going. Yeah, Cthulhu. Yeah. Teach me how to paint faster, Cthulhu. Teach me how to have enough free time to paint faster. I've got my Spartan over here too. Hold on. Got him assembled in bits. And I know that last week when Chandler was on, I haven't seen Chandler tonight. Maybe he was on and I missed him. I'm sorry if I did. He had a fantastic idea. What his suggestion was for me to basically paint a stripe, right? So like wider than this, I'm thinking. Obviously much wider than this, but here, let me grab something that is wider than that. That airbrush needle is expensive, and I don't want to break it. So I'll break this stuff over here instead. All right. So something like this, right? Something about this width to paint a yellow stripe down the center, down, like off center down these guys, probably across this turret as well, so it's continuous. And actually, I think that's a fantastic idea. But let me tell you why I'm not going to do that, okay? So to do that sort of painting, what I have to do is I have to come in and, in my mind, I have to paint a big block of yellow, right? More than this strip, right? I have to paint some yellow, or possibly mask off, because I was going to be masking no matter way. Basically, come in and put some tape down through here, and then come on and paint the yellow so the yellow is right here in the exposed part. After that dries, then I have to remove the tape and put a piece of tape back to protect the yellow, so I can now come in and paint this green, right? And the same thing on this really irregularly structured turret piece too, okay? And that is doable. That's the sort of thing I have done before. My very first cab paint scheme had something like that. Not a line, but it had they were left half white, right half gray or red and white, depending on how you're looking at them. They were split in half, and I had to maintain that line down the center. Okay, but the problem is this is a slow grower league, so I've got 2 weeks to paint these 3 tanks and this Spartan, and have them ready to be played. All right, so I have decided there's just too much overhead. There's too much work involved in trying to maintain. Lift these up so you can actually see them in focus. To try and maintain the integrity of this yellow line that Chandler suggests that I paint down here. I think it's a much better idea than what I currently am going to do, but it's also much slower because of the fact I've got to do all that masking, and then I've got to do the masking again, and then invariably it's going to get messed up a little bit, and then I've got to touch it up so it still looks like a straight line, and then I'm using a brush to try and repair airbrushed paint highlights. It's just too much. You guys are merciless. All right, show me your projects. All right. You people this is a tough crowd tonight. Come on now. All right, so instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this Spartan and I'm going to paint the torso and this arm and this leg green. I'm going to give this arm and this leg yellow, and on these guys I'm going to go green bodies and yellow turrets, maybe with some green accents. I'll probably bring some green in here to chop the yellow up a little bit to give it just a little bit of a breakup. But I'm going to go for that because that's much faster. Yes, you're right. I could be painting instead of streaming. Always a tough crowd, Mr. Gimli. Always a tough crowd. So that's where I'm going with this. All right. So now I guess I'm going to talk about shenanigans. I decided. Like I said, there's no sense trying to. I would start the airbrush up and then I'd spend more time cleaning it than I did painting. Gimli Just paint up just paint up your calves and use them as your monsters. And when the players go, what's that? I mean, for once in your life, they won't look at an ANKEG and immediately know its stats and its weaknesses and all the bad, how to defeat it. They see a werewolf and know to use silvered weapons. Burn down the webs for the spiders. Throw down a duelist. All right, and say, okay, this comes around the corner. What do you do? They're going to be like, what the bleep is that? Yeah, you just get a Tiamat. You just get them with a Tiamat. All right. So let's talk about shenanigans as relates to indirect fire. So calves, as we said earlier, are they're level 3. Okay. They can also block line of sight. Okay. So what that means is if this fire drake, let's get this guy on the screen here. This fire drake wants to shoot this Templar, and this Sovereign is in the way, and the line of sight, here, bring this needle in, it's getting double duty tonight, pass the line of sight from the center of the fire drake to the center of the duelist, passes through the Sovereign. This guy's level 3, this guy's level 3, this guy's level 3. He cannot see that guy. No direct fire. None whatsoever. Well, so now let's talk about indirect fire. So let's replace this. Although the fire drake does have rockets, I'll use the Sovereign. Again, distances are not to scale. So this Sovereign wants to shoot the duelist with indirect fire who's standing right behind this Sovereign. So this Sovereign is obscuring cover because the duelist is within an inch and the line of sight passes through this Sovereign. The enemy Sovereign cannot damage the duelist with indirect fire. That brings to mind all kinds of crazy shenanigans. Just really strange things that you can do to hide people, things from fire. Yeah, and Cab Boss is working to, or maybe it's already there and I'm not savvy enough to understand how that works. But I think this scenario is going to go away very rapidly, if it ever really existed. But I mean, in the basic rules, this guy provides cover to that guy. These guys are all the same elevation. There's no line of sight to this guy that doesn't pass through this guy. So this guy is effectively a building at this point. And so all that stuff should still apply. But again, I'm telling you, John is already aware of this, and he's either I'm not clever enough to read the rules and understand how this doesn't work, or he's going to restructure the wording, redefine something so that this scenario doesn't exist in terms of indirect fire. I'm assuming it'll still exist for direct fire. Yeah, okay. Yeah, exactly. But just not indirect fire. Because like I said, I can think of all kinds of just bizarre things you could do to hide wounded models, or just use a model that's burned out its PPGs and has no other purpose but to just block line of sight from indirect. I don't know. It just seems there's a lot of gamey things down that path. And it's something that I think John is going to address in the game. I'm not sure what his answer is going to be, but I'm sure it'll be a great answer because I have faith in John's ability to maintain the cav rules. So there we go. Not a drop of paint was spilled tonight. No models were oversprayed. No airbrushes were clogged. And of course, the converse of that is no models were painted either. Come on, Gimli, you're kind of slow. I was waiting for that one. Trying to set you up there, buddy. Interesting. There are no fire support models with bone chained fire and EST. Yeah, EST is a... So there are some fire supports with EST. Gimli, one of these days, buddy. One of these days. Right to the moon. two are named Ursa. Well, that's interesting because those are new models. Sweet. So John says cover that obstructs buildings, hills will prevent damage. Cover that obscures blocks line of sight but doesn't prevent indirect damage. All right, so we're going to get some clarification about the nature of obscuring and obstructing cover, I think. Sweet. We're making this game better. I mean, people play, people come up with questions, we throw them at John. John tells us, hey, look over here, here's the answer already. Or if in the rare case we find something that maybe needs to be tweaked. I mean, we've got the game designer who participates with us closer than anybody I've ever seen in my life. So, I mean, I've said this a long time ago, back on the Big Stompy podcast when that was the thing with Ross. I've said it pretty sure on the Wednesday stream, and I'm saying it here tonight. It's just amazing to have such direct access to the person who's in charge of the game. It's fantastic. Responsive, insightful. I just love it. Can gain cover and blocks direct fire line of sight as long as it crosses through the con. Yeah. So we're really excited to see that ROE book. Very excited. There's a lot of exciting things. John does occasionally share things that are pre-production with this, and I'm telling you, I've seen some things that are very exciting. Very, very exciting. But you'll have to bug him on Wednesday to to pry some details out about that. Colonel Kane, New Memphis. What is this? What's wrong with old Memphis? Function over form. I mean, that's something we have to understand, right? I mean, in our heads, we're playing, this brutal, wonderful, near future military game, right? But on the table, we're playing a game, right? It's gotta work, right? It's like chess, right? The moves have all got to be balanced. Everything's got to make sense. But in our heads, in our stories, in the lore that we make up, all the cool things happen. We just have to understand, the queen can't actually chop the king's head off in chess. That would be destructive. That's technically what happens in my head. So it's the same thing that's going on here. Ilmarin, hit us with a question. We got 2 minutes. Oh, here we go. Racks have an AoE. But they're not indirect fire. All right? So racks are not indirect fire. So I'm going to say probably the direct fire rules apply to them. You have to have a target, right? You can't shoot racks at the ground? I don't know. John, can you shoot racks at the ground? Or do they have to have a model as a target? Come on, John, putting you to work. Oh, come on. I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention. I had to allow something Ilmarin said. Yeah. I allowed it, so I don't know if you can do it again or why it didn't just... Yeah, I guess ogre is a questionable term. Model has to be in line of sight. All right, so when you're firing those racks with an AoE, you have to have a model as a target, I think is what John is saying, right? So you can't lob them at the ground and hope to reach around the corner of the building. But what is the gnomic shooting with? Does the gnomic have these racks? Okay, so I mean, obviously John will answer for real. All right, so John, now I'm confused. Can the racks target the ground, the ones with the AoE? Well, I mean, Imran, in that scenario, I would think yes. I mean, the normally an AOE that damages every model it touches. Okay. But so here's the question I think that's coming up, and maybe I'm just not understanding it, John. So I've got this building here, right? Okay. And I fire at the ground right here with my rack AOE. And the rack AOE is something like this. And I'm standing here behind the building, but the AOE touches me. Am I damaged by the rack's AOE? I mean, the shot's not going around the shooter is, let's say he's right here, John. He's got line of sight to this spot right here, but he doesn't have line of sight to the model behind the building. I mean, my understanding is if you get touched by an AOE in Cav, other than being in the shadow of a building for indirect fire, you take damage, right? All right. That seems really complicated. So, I mean, he puts down an AOE, and the AOE touches another model, but there's no line of sight to that model, then you can't damage them? So that means, and I'll just illustrate Ilmarin's example, right? So this fire drake suddenly now has a rack. Okay? He shoots his rack at this guy, has no line of sight to this guy, puts down a template that touches this guy, but he can't damage this back guy? This rack, this AoE from the rack cannot damage this guy? I'm just clarifying this to make sure I really understand it, Mr. Cav Boss. So why do they have an AoE? Okay, I'm a little confused. All right, so now I'm out here, right? And so now there is line of sight from my base, from his center to my center, and I drop an AoE here that touches the corner of this guy's base. Right in here where you can't see. Both guys are hit. Okay, all right. That's not the way I understood that, but that's cool. I'm not arguing about it, just not the way I understood it. So if you don't have line of sight to a model, you can't hurt it. Does that apply for regular? I mean, that's the thing that's going on earlier with regular indirect fire, right? So, I mean, if I've got a nest of models here, right? Where's my other sovereign, right? I got these guys right here. And this guy shoots a line, like an indirect fire at them. The big O template. He can only hurt the ones he can see the center of their base. So their AoEs have different rules, is what you're saying. Okay, all right. Interesting. I am really looking forward to the ROE so we can see the cleaned up language. Yeah, I mean, I get in my head, I see it, right? But in the context of the game, I don't recall reading anywhere that rack AoEs are different from indirect fire AoEs. They're just AoEs. I didn't understand there were two different kinds of AoE. But I guess there are. At least it seems like there are. Maybe I don't understand. One thing I do understand is it's after 9 o'clock. And so I am about to sign off and go have some dinner. I really appreciate everybody showing up. It's a very lively, spirited sort of conversation. I enjoyed sharing the things I had learned. Cab Boss is going to educate us on Wednesday, so I'm looking forward to hearing that. And I hope you all come and bring all the questions. And hopefully we'll get this cleaned up so that we understand it properly and we know how to play the game properly, which is exactly what I want to do. I want to teach people how to play, and I want them to have fun playing. So that's it for tonight. Join Cab Boss Wednesday. Ask all the questions, 8 p.m. Central Standard, right here on this same Twitch time. The same Cav Time Save Cav channel. All right? Chris will be back on Saturday. I think he's almost done with that Scorpion model. If not, he's super close. I watched a lot of that show for once I got to watch on Saturday. That thing is looking fantastic. So if you have not had a chance to take that in, you need to look. John was in there giving him some feedback directly, and Chris was changing it with the feedback and feeding back to John, and it was kind of fun. It was a lot of fun. And then I'll be back on next Monday, actually painting, unless of course I'm not, in which case you can yell at me for not painting. But I will have some more. I will have paint on these models by then, so there'll be something to show. Check out the forums. That's where I'm posting up my progress. Yeah, seriously, Gimli, but will I? I promise you, I will put some paint on these models between now and then. Okay, I can't actually promise that. The aliens might invade. I might win the lottery and decide I don't like painting models anymore. Not really, I don't play the lottery. It's a tax on people who are bad at math, but that's okay. I will be back. There will be paint on these sabers, maybe even on this Spartan. And follow my progress over on the forums. I'll try and keep people posted on Facebook and Discord, but I'm moving most of my attention over to the forums, which I'm hoping you'll join us all over there. And now I'm going to get off of here. Thanks for hanging out. This is the kind of stuff I really love. You guys be safe, be happy, be nice, be good to each other, be good to everybody. Tschüss.